Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Alisha here at Cosmic Gateway. Super excited to introduce my two guests that I have with me. I have Dale once again, and based off the last video that we did, we've brought back Louise. So, welcome, guys. Thank you for being here. I am really excited to dive into today's topics. We're going to be talking a lot about the implications of the energetic times that we're living through right now and in relation to mental health, how people's mental health has perhaps been suffering based on what we've gone through, especially here in Australia or Melbourne over the last couple of years, and rebuilding that, but also the implications of the energetics. And I think that's something that's not widely spoken about enough. The energetics in regards to mental health. Obviously, Louise has a background in psychiatry for over 30 years. I've worked in mental health, and Dale has worked in very similar fields too. So I always find it really fascinating when people who are quite intuitive or have, gifts and abilities where they can see the non-physical world and their perception and take on mental health when it comes to energies, entities, intrusive thoughts. So we're going to go dive into all sorts of wonderful depth of conversation, and I hope that this helps and supports people to shine a different perspective. So I'm gonna throw it over to you guys now. Welcome, Louise. Welcome, Dale.
Thank you. Lovely to be back.
Yeah, it was about a year ago, wasn't it? Was it almost a year ago?
I think it was July.
July, yeah.
Yeah, July.
Well, do you know what, Louise? It's been like a bit of a theme for me the last few weeks because I watched that what's his name? Sarzinski, that guy. I watched him.
Oh, Jerry Mazinski.
Mazinski, that's it.
Yeah.
Those bloody Balkan names. Yeah. And and then I thought of you straight away.
Yeah.
But I remember reading like Robert Stanley's book years ago too. I don't know if you know him.
I don't actually know.
Yeah. But he's kind of similar. He worked spoke about entities and stuff within hospitals.
Yeah. Yeah, Jerry Mazinski, he's a powerhouse of information, really, isn't he? Because he worked in the biggest psychiatric facility, I think, in the world. I think it was. So
there's like 10,000 people in one facility. It's warehousing of
Yeah, it's like a giant battery, really, isn't it? If you think about it, that's what it would have been used for energetic.
Should we get Louise to like give a brief background for if people haven't seen it from a year ago? Because that was such a good chart. So yeah, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I started. I'm nearly 57, so just give you an idea of where I'm at age-wise. So I started nursing back in the late 80s as a state enrolled nurse. I started in a facility called Kingston Centre, which is primarily for aged people, and then I decided that after a year that I wanted to do my mental health aid. So I went to Larundel, which is a great big asylum in Bundoora, which is no longer open. So the big red brick asylums like you see at Ararat and things like that. So I did a year there, and then I decided to do my registered nursing, and I did 3 years of psych training, and that was through Heatherton Hospital, which is just in Victoria. It's right next door to Kingston Centre, actually, and through the Royal Park School of Nursing. And Royal Park was next to the Children's Hospital in the city, and that was a great big mental institution at the time. So that's my background of nursing. My background is that
your other background.
My other background. Which part do you want to know? Like I'm very intuitive. I've always been interested in the paranormal and supernatural. I've had lots of experiences in my lifetime. I come from a family, this is a little bit off topic, but a Freemasonic family. So there's been some experiences through that as well. Not that my dad was, but it was right through until my dad sort of stopped that energy to a point. So always, I think always been very aware of energy, I guess, and that there's life after death, and there's things that we don't know about. So I've done
Do you
briefly.
think, sorry, I was just going to say, do you think your psychic abilities were enhanced at all due to that Masonic line?
I think so. I think it just depends on your belief system. I do believe I believe it's quite a long Masonic line, and I did have an entity attached to me at the time, which I didn't know. And I think when you do have an entity attached, that actually can enhance your psychic abilities. It's because that's they can do that. When I removed it, I still had the psychic abilities, but they were finer and high vibration, if that makes sense. It's so there was a point that I understood what it was and removed it, but.
I have a question based on that, because that's something that's something that I've often thought of is people who have natural psychic abilities maybe go through an abrupt awakening and then have attachments, entity attachments. Do you believe that the quality, once that was removed, the quality of the information was more accurate? Like, do you think that entity was manipulating? Yes, you were giving out good information, but perhaps it was not as clear. Maybe it was a bit like there was a lot of interference coming through.
I do believe so, and it also when it was removed, my life became less chaotic. I attracted less drama. And I had brief forays into doing some readings, because you can, you know what I mean? Not that I really wanted to, but everyone's saying you should do it because you can. But, I'd use my intuition in my normal work as well. And I'd always attract, people with entities or people, people with spirits around, like grandpa apologising for, sexually molesting the granddaughter. So I quickly dove out of that because I didn't really want to do that or go there. It was too full on. So, yeah. I was in the light and love, 90s, and didn't want to go there.
Fair enough. We've all been through that phase.
Yes.
To some extent, maybe not Dale, but
yeah, no,
I don't like. I just think it's important to note because still some people they very much like stereotype a certain family that like because someone was a Mason that it's like you have to be involved, because I know like Rachel Vaughan's got abilities as well too, but hers, she basically seen it as like a flip. She's flipped like abilities that came through trauma and then transmitted it. But what I wanted to ask was because I was watching that Selwyn Stevens, the guy that's written all these books on Freemasonry, and he said because he's a Christian guy and he works removing the Masonic curses from family lines. But he said that at whatever degree they made it to, that is the part of the body that it would affect. So the first degree is is the throat, because they do the hoodwink, and then the second degree is the heart, and then so on and so on. So
I think
that's what I was going to ask. Like, where was your entity attached?
Well, it can actually probably, I don't know if you can still see, it was actually attached right there. And the reason I started to notice because my skin started to get the discoloring, that like liver spots there, and that eye has always been a little bit. It's my left eye, and it always been a little bit more hooded than the other eye. You know how you see the celebrities with a hooded eye. Yeah. So, and when it's a lot better now since I've removed it, my eye became back. So I realised it was here, and I'd always get a lot of pressure, headaches here. So when it went, all of that sort of moved. And
well, that's a ritual, left eye ritual as well, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, what degree would that be?
I was, I hate to say it, I was when I was 6 weeks old. Was it 6 months old? No, it was 6 months old. My mum had a stint in hospital, I guess, maybe a breakdown or physical breakdown. And I was looked after by her friends of the family who were full Illuminati. They weren't just Masons, they were Bavarian Illuminati. So I don't know, something happened to me then. They actually transgendered their daughter, who's about a year older than me, at birth. They said that she was born with a micro penis, so they made her into a girl. So, and I found that out later in life, but very rich family for no good reason family, if you know what I mean. So, so I think maybe something might have happened there, to be quite honest, because that would make sense.
it paints a much bigger picture of the work that you end up doing, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking Lisa Left Eye Lopez, and that's like, because that, you know, they do that ritual with the Pope and like and like Charles and that. It's always the left eye. Isn't it?
Yeah, and it really made a difference when it finally left. It actually said, "Don't make me leave." So, you know, it obviously been with me for long. I didn't feel that I had an entity ever. You know, I was doing all the white lighting and all the, you know, the protection and, you know, doing everything that you're taught will fix those things, and it didn't. I didn't even register it was there.
Sometimes they can get so enmeshed in you that it becomes an aspect of you, and that's why it's so hard to detect. I think that's something that I've seen recently with a lot of clients, is that now they're being exposed and wanting to come up and transform. But I always try and look at it from a really empowered perspective, of, you know, we have almost like a soul agreement. You know, we have soul agreements with, you know, physical humans and other people, but I think we also have soul agreements when it comes to entities and attachments, because there's always lessons to be learnt through the experience that we gain through that, without, you know, trying to not go into fear. But
yeah, fully agree. Yeah, I mean, a great lesson for me, for my life, you know, so I'm thankful for it. Yeah.
I'm curious now, because I've had this weird thing happening with my eye for about 6 months, and I'm like chipping away at trying to understand it. It's not my left eye, it's my right eye. And it's always, what I've noticed is I feel the sensation when I'm in conflict, not in conflict, in contact with people who I feel have entity attack. It's like a detector. It's like when I feel there's either interference energy in the field around me, or I'm interacting, my right eye starts to glitch.
Yeah, I actually get, my left eye still will warn me, you know, like if there's a negative entity come into the room, for instance, and my left eye will still do, you know, like I'll get a sensation in it, and I can feel, and I feel, oh, something's around. So it's become a warning system for me. Warns me about the towers as well. You know, when you're driving up to a tower, I can feel them before I see them. So I find it's, and I'll often say, oh, something's not good. So it helps me differentiate between, you know, a nice, you know, energy.
Did you notice did your creativity or intuition increase after that, if it was blocking on the left side? Because it, like, obviously tamper with the right side of the brain.
Well, I tell you what, everything did, because
so I think that's part of the ritual why they do the left eye, right? Because it's an attack on the feminine.
Yeah, look, I always felt really masculine before as well. I know that's, I mean, I've always been a feminine looking lady and liked all makeup and things, but I always felt more masculine than I should have. That was an interesting thing. That was, you know, I realised when it left that feeling went. It used to make me more irritated. You know, if you have an argument with your other half, you know, I'd get really irritated, unreasonably, and you know, over the top. And afterwards, I think, why did I do that? But once that left, you know, I just have the normal irritation that you have, and it just wouldn't go any further. I never felt the need to, you know, get really upset. So that was a good thing. But yeah, definitely more creative. I got back more into my painting and things like that too.
Cool.
Yeah, fascinating. Good question, Dale. Yeah.
Where do we want to go? I've got so many questions.
I know you're itching, so I'll just like throw it over to you for a bit.
No, you did it. You're leading there.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess probably one of the main things that I wanted to bring up in this conversation is like what I've been observing recently, probably for a couple of months, but it feels like it's increasing. And it's the mental energy. It's this very negative, it's impactful negative energy with a sprinkle of not intrusive thoughts that's going around at the moment. Like, it's very loud. And I remember, or you guys probably remember, during COVID, during second lockdown, like second year 2021, around the time of the vaccine rollout, and they were using that. I know a lot of people woke up and they went and got the vaccination because there was this so I wanted to bring that up because I think it's being pumped really really vigorously right now. And I just want to know if you guys had noticed that or spoken to anyone who's noticed that, because I don't know, it feels like it's ramping up, and I think there's a reason for that.
I think definitely everyone I was talking to are feeling uneasy about and feeling there's something not right. They're feeling like this uneasiness, and that they can't settle in themselves. So the people that are non sort of aware, there's so they just they can't put their finger on why they're feeling like that. So that's what I'm hearing. I noticed myself. What was it? I got it. Late in the last couple of nights, I was working and I said something to someone I shouldn't have said. Like when you talk a little bit out of turn, and it played on my mind all night. Now that would normally not even go past the first. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, it's okay. And I thought, oh, that's not normal. So then I sort of started to clear myself off again. So it's like they find a weakness and it's being emphasized.
Yeah. Beautifully, yeah. Yep, I can relate to that 100%.
Yeah, you know what? That's true. You know about Operation Crimson Mist in Rwanda.
No.
So that was it was like a CIA program that was in the 90s, and they caused one of the tribes to do go into like a violent rage through technology that they're beaming from the helicopters and that. But and what it came out in the declassified documents, because they had to row up the public first. So they had to get them into a state of fear and anger for the technology to work. So they did that. The CIA was doing it to manipulate the population, and then once they brought this anger and fear to the population, then they could zap them with the energy weapon, and they turn into absolute maniacs. So it's the exact same thing they do here. That's what they got to build up high emotion. Then you're on attack. So, but if you're heart centered, that energy actually can't penetrate you at all.
Sometimes, when they first, maybe just before COVID, when we were really aware of the 5G and the towers and things, I remember my husband and I were driving to Dandenong in Victoria, which is it's got a lot of industry, and it's not a high socio-economic area. And there's lots of towers in amongst the estate, and we started getting more irritable as we were driving, to the point we started an argument, which is just over nothing. And we both realised it was the towers, because as soon as we drove out, everything just calmed down again. And also Hastings in Victoria, there's got quite a few. They're quite triangulated. And for a long time, when I was working in that area, I was feeling nauseous and got headaches as soon as I got in amongst the towers. But I'd also get really depressed. Like I'd want to cry for no reason. And I'm not depressed, So, that's another thing that's been coming up, Alisha, the last few days. I've, actually a few weeks, I've been wanting to cry for no reason. Nothing to do with me. I am not depressed, so I've got nothing to worry me, and I'm like, I really want to cry.
Yeah.
That's how I felt after Canberra. That was like depression, but complete, like scattered.
Yeah.
Alisha she rang me like the morning of the big protest, and she's like, something's not good, Dale. And I'm like, yeah, I can fucking feel it.
Yeah.
And
so and the AIs, and I noticed my daughter's really addicted to her phone, and I noticed that really affects her mood because she's always on it. It's never far from her hand, and I guess a lot of young people, in their 20s are the same, and it's so manipulative. They can put so many programs through the phone. And I also remember reading or watching a story about I think it was a chiropractor or physio, and they were doing massage on someone, and they'd have their phones next to them on the table, and they'd actually see grey entities jumping out of the phones quite often, because they must have been a bit psychic. So when the person was in an altered state and relaxed, these entities would pop out. So just food for thought there, isn't there? So,
oh my goodness. I'm glad I brought this up with you, because you guys have nailed it, and that's how it feels, and it has felt for months and I often I'll wake up, and if I feel, because my sensitivity has gone through the roof this year, so I feel everything, and it's another level up of self-mastery to work within the parameters of that sensitivity, being able to feel everything and function, and but at least I'm aware of what it is and that it's
Mm.
not, you know, and I can come, like Dale said, I can come back into my heart space and go, oh, there I am, I'm okay. But
Yeah.
I can feel it like it's like I'm inside. The moment I step outside, I'm like, whoa, like the contrast, and just observing that contrast of I'm completely fine inside. I step outside and it's like I say to myself, wow, they're really blasting today. Like whatever
Yeah.
frequency they're emitting or whatever's in the air, like it's intense and it's like it's like it's either hits as anxiety, depression, fight or flight. It gets the nervous system going, and it's making people on guard and like really, you know, weak.
Yeah.
I
And you
would say, yeah.
and you see it on the road too, like you know, there's people are more erratic on the roads as well. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like
Mm-hmm.
I try and avoid shopping centres and major crowds for all the obvious.
I got the finger twice last week.
Oh, did you? Yeah, not people are just not. They're not caring. They don't even indicate anymore. I mean, you know, and it's this lack of concentration, and you can just tell people are just sort of discombobulated, you know, on the roads. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
think
we're
there's,
talking. You go.
oh, I was just going to say, I think I just want to mention that it's a component of what's happening. You know, we can't disregard the fact that there's so much light coming onto the planet. It's exposing people's shadows. You know, we don't take away from the personal work.
No.
And also, I know that there's a lot of astrological alignments that we're in right now that are also compounding. So the multiple level, you know, I don't want to disregard that it's just
No,
thing.
and
It's
all the
kind of many.
and the sun spots and the you know the the energy coming from those as well, and yeah, and it is true. Like you know, the level of that we are affected is to you know should be overridden by our heart space. It really should be.
Yeah, 100.
You know,
Keep it
and,
simple. Yeah.
yeah, and it is simple. The most all the beliefs we have, you bring it right back to that. You know, do unto others. You know, the most basic things. You know, be kind, be loving, and if you need to be righteous, but don't take it too far. Do you know what I mean? So it's all those things, but don't be a wimp and go it's all love and light because it's not. You it's not. You can't be a warrior and fight a battle and win if it's you know all love and light. And we are kind of you know in a warrior energy a little bit still because of where we are. You know, it doesn't matter why we came here. That's what the reality is in this reality in this realm right now. So, yeah.
Back to you, Dale. I sort of cut you off. Where were you going?
I mean, I don't want to steer it off course, but I've got like, I was just thinking, because I know you spoke about, you know, entities and stuff within these, you know, mental wards or whatever they were. Have you seen a difference between the types of entities back then, because and what's appearing now? And the other one was I was going to say is. I know like Charles Manson spoke about it, and there's another guy, Cody Snodgrass, who was in solitary confinement. He was an ex Black Ops guy, and he said that they were doing that to him and Timothy McVeigh and stuff. That the prison systems were set up with these technological devices. So, do you feel like those entities that you were seeing on people were they a technological entity?
I think I think they're more spiritual what I was seeing, but maybe that could have just been a level of my awareness to Dale at the time. But
right.
But we, you know, remember I did my majority of my nursing back in the 90s in those institutions. So you know we've gone leaps and bounds since then. Some would be there was a lot of delusions. I'll say what I was the way I was taught, but there were a lot of people would. Always the themes were that people would believe the CIA was spying on them. There was cameras up in the ceiling. There was cameras in the corner. They could read their minds. They were controlling them. So, you know, that was a definite, you know, you'd always find someone, you know, and why the CIA in Australia? You know, we weren't talking about it back then that much. So, you know, it wasn't in your forefront. So that I think there was those type of things. But the spiritual entities I saw with the schizophrenics, they didn't look technological. They looked, you know, biological, for want of a better word. Yeah. But now I think with some of the drugs going to ice and you know things like that, I got out before the ice came in, but the amount of aggression and the amount of the person losing themselves to that drug would probably, so I'd say it was more combination, you know, that there was something in that would give whatever, the AI or whatever total control.
I think that ice is like its own entity because it's
Yeah.
I mean that is a synthetically created drug that has been
Yeah.
pushed in.
Yeah.
Like they make it up in Myanmar and that, and they bring it down into places like Perth.
Yeah.
It's a completely different entity that I feel. It's like
Yeah. It's an awful one.
Yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah, alcohol's still one of the worst that I know. I had to harp on to it, but alcoholics and they tend to be really affected in a violent way. You know how you always see about the aggro alcoholic and there was a whole ward of ex-alcoholics at Larundel, one of the north, I think it was North Four, and I remember the first injection I gave was to one of those, and he'd been put in seclusion, and it was a metal door, and we thought he was going to break through it. He was just, phenomenal strength. And he was, I think I told the story before, it was the first time I'd ever given the needle, and they sort of pulled his pants down and said, you do that one. People jumped on him. I was like, oh my God.
Oh,
and actually, because of that, I think it was him. Yeah, that's right, it was. And after that, I was actually, I could hardly ever give an injection, which is pretty, not great when you're a nurse, because I was so traumatized by my first go. I used to avoid giving them out as much as possible, so, which is funny. So
did you ever have any, last one that you can jump in, did you ever have like obviously you were picking up things and sensing things and seeing things while working there. Did you ever have corroboration from other nurses that they kind of picked up on something as well? Like
sometimes you'd find it was more non-Australian nurses that might, from different backgrounds, South American or even the Irish. We had a lot of Irish nurses come over in the 90s because there's big asylums over there, and there was a big push. Yeah, they were a lot more sensitive to those type of things, and they'd sort of tell you more ghost stories. No one ever really, it was very rare that you'd hear anyone talk about, possession. It was only probably the early twos, I think, about when I went and worked in a geriatric facility. Where was it? Ringwood. And there was obviously possessed old lady in her 90s, and there was a nurse who was also a pastor. And he'd had the crosses on the wall, and he would openly talk to me that she was possessed, and that was the first time that someone would actually say it outright to me. So, and it was obviously it was just she was lying in bed. She literally had bed sores. She was skin and bone. She was, she'd lie with her legs sort of sticking straight up like that for hours. And if you tried to do anything with you, she'd spit and hiss and try and bite you. And she shouldn't have been alive. She was barely tolerating any food. She would, spit that out at you as well. And she was, aggressive in her demeanor and, swear at you and that type of thing. So, it was such an obvious one. He did everything. He did all the Christian things to try and get rid of that entity. But I think sometimes they're just so entrenched, there's nothing that you can do. There are times when things can't be moved. And, so she died that way. But, yeah, but it kept her alive for a long time. So, which I think
that's kind of, the energy source is actually the parasite inside of her. That's
yeah. That was always really confronting. The other thing I find with the biological type energies, because just I've got a family member that's been on ice and things like that, and she when she becomes sort of psychotic with it, she spits. She starts spitting, and then the family know that it's going to escalate her. Her behaviours will escalate as soon as she starts spitting, and spitting seems to be a theme with people that are possessed or obsessed. So there's always a degree. Yeah.
Interesting. This is giving me many flashbacks of experiences.
I know one. I know one that Robert Stanley spoke about, because he wasn't even aware of this stuff. And he went into a hospital and he calls them archons, whether that's just a generic term for, or like dark sort of shadow beings. And he saw it hook onto the person, and they ran out and jumped out of the building and killed themselves once that entity. And he saw the entity take over the person. And but yeah, I know he's mentioned that too, like spitting and even like playing with feces and stuff like that.
Yeah, but, and often the eyes can change. But when I had my attachment, I remember, because I didn't know, I remember talking to a young man went to have lunch in a pub, and there was just a nice young man, and about my son's age, and I was saying that to him. He's about 23, my son was 23 at the time, and he was talking about something spiritual. So I, you could tell he was really light, and I mentioned something spiritual, but then he jumped back like in fright from me, and I actually think that the entity scared him, making my eyes become like reptilian, so in hindsight. So yeah, there's all that sort of thing too. So yeah.
It's so fascinating. I guess to kind of educate people who may not be as familiar with this topic and attachments, entities, and things like that, like, I want to hear from your perspective. What is the purpose of it? Why do these entities attach to humans and manipulate behaviors, enhance perhaps addictions, or create outbursts, aggression, whatnot? Like, what's the actual purpose? Why does this happen?
Do you want me to answer, or do you want?
I'd love to hear from both of you. Yeah.
Okay. I guess part of the negative emotions. I think people call it loosh. They can feed, the entities will feed off our negative emotions. I mean, you hear that there's a jealousy that because we're creator beings that they want to be like us, and so they like to control it. They're from a different dimension, so they've got more control. Going through someone and taking over our mind and our body for a brief time, or for a long time for some. So yeah, it's their way into this to have some control, I guess, which they don't have where they are. Yeah. And they're not heart-centered, are they? So they have to learn to be that. And I guess some of it's be learning for them, because unknowingly, even though they might do that, they would have to be influenced by our heart emotions as well. So so even for them to evolve.
Oh yeah, beautifully said. Thank you, Louise. Dale, do you have anything you want to add to that?
What was the question? It was kind of like why
Yeah, why?
I think there's obviously, and Louise, you'd know this better, but there's obviously all different sort of types, but I think you can cluster all those groups, even if you want to call them organic and the technological entities, they're sort of all clustered into that that they're parasitic, right? The ones that attach are parasitic, so they're obviously, it's like the Matrix, man. it's like the but like I believe too that they, like everything within the universe, there has to be free will. So there has to be some law, some type of universal or natural law that's been broken, either by a collective group of people within the family bloodline, and on a soul agreement that's already been agreed. To. But there has to have been some law broken. And I was speaking to someone even recently about, like what's happened to the Indigenous in Australia, right? And on some level, and this is about taking ownership too, and not because the government constantly wants them to be victims, right? And they play into that, because I think the parasite, that it loves that energy more than anything, the victim. So there was some law that was even broken by the people here that allowed this to come in, right? Allowed that force to come into this continent. So, and even like Chip Tatum used to say that when they were going to assassinate someone, he worked on Pegasus, like a kit team, that they would have to inform, because everything's as above, so below. So they would have to inform the person that they're going to assassinate that they were going to do it beforehand. You can't just kill them. So it's that free will aspect. So it's the same with an entity. If you dabble in ice, that's like, this is, and the more you're aware of it, and I knew this started happening to me more, like once I was aware of like entities attaching onto me when I was drinking, and then I was fully aware of it, and I'd still go out and drink, it would happen twice as bad, because you're completely giving your free will to it, right? So,
and that's when you see them, when people are really drunk, their eyes will change. That's another time you'll see it, and I think that's what, going back to my story. It's just when the entity takes over, your eyes will change, and I think you mentioned on the last video that you've got green eyes, and so is Alisha, and I've got green eyes. And I remember, and I know, and I do think I actually do believe that, you know, our family, I've got German background as well and things, and I believe that, as well as English and Scottish, and so I do believe it's bloodline too, for, you know. A lot of the white race, I think, hold the parasites a lot better, and I think the Indigenous and darker races maybe can be less affected in some ways, you know, or more resilient from them, I believe. I don't know if that's true, but if you think about the history of what we know of history, that seems to be we're the most destructive race of recent times. We go across and wipe out Indigenous cultures for hundreds of years. So, and they're the ones that can see into the other realms. They're the ones that were more knowing. So that's lost. But yeah, so I was thinking about that the other day, that, you know, we probably, you know, we're a darker race in some respects because of we're more easily manipulated than others. So I don't know how true that is, but you know what I mean. Like, just as a general, if you think about recent history, it's the white races that have come from Europe and taken over the world, and, you know.
But that tells me the power of the white race too, because why would you want to manipulate and inhabit the host of the white race unless you wanted to denigrate them as well as the oppressor? So I
just wonder where we started from, that we were So I'm not putting the white race down, but just an observation.
I'm coming in to bat for the white race. I know what you're saying though.
Yeah.
And I mean, that even goes into a lot of the tall white sort of stuff too, doesn't it? And like, if it comes from that genetic line.
Yeah.
Because like that tall white's said to be like, they're like really manipulative and stuff, right? That and that it, you know, even the reptilians work below them. So
yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, I think my sister had her DNA done, like, we're 33% Scandinavian, you know, Nordic, and, you know, that type of thing. So in our family as well, there's a big component of that. Yeah.
Were you able to communicate directly to some of these entities possessing people when you were working in the facilities?
I tended to be a little bit protected from it, because, you know, once they communicate with me.
Yeah.
You know, there was one, sometimes, you know, just to try and, you know, upset me. Like, there was, most recent experience was a lady who, she was a very pious religious lady, but when she had a psychotic break, she would call herself like the bride of, you know, Satan type of thing, and be overtly sexual. So she'd go from being normal, and then she'd start wearing, you know, boots and things. And she came out into the rec room one day and started screaming that she wanted the devil to, you know, what to her, and all explicit language, and pulled up a dress and exposed her genitalia, and, you know, things like that. So I think things like that were shown to me, you know, where it was very obvious she was taken over. This was not her at all. And but she was, so I didn't communicate with them, but I heard the communication. They tell me that that the voices were talking to them, or they'd, you know, but I wouldn't talk directly to the voices. Like, during this, we were told the same story. You don't encourage it, don't. But I didn't actually go that far. I would listen to them and not discourage them from talking about it, but I wouldn't try and talk to the entity, because, you know, at that time I probably wasn't as aware. Yeah.
Well, modern medicine they don't talk to these people, right? When they're saying,
no,
like, they're spying on me and stuff, like, you never even consider that may be the case.
Yeah, I didn't, but I would let them talk it through, which we weren't supposed to do. You know what I mean? Just so they'd have a you know, a sympathetic ear at least. You know.
Have you, Alisha? Have you ever heard that one where Ashley, Gabby Chung interviews Ashley, who is in a facility in Brisbane?
No.
And the lady, the head psych running the facility, also writes all the reports up for the prison. And that person was in on the cult, and said, like, they chuck all the cult abused kids go into the facility. So you can understand when you get into that. That's almost my greatest fear, is like being locked in somewhere and like trying to explain to people what the hell's going on, and then you're crazy.
Yeah, well, that lady I told you about, I know for a fact that she came from one of the higher socioeconomic areas, on the peninsula, and they were a family of industrialists. They were friends because I knew my mum had been a housekeeper in that area, so she'd worked for people, old money, and big money still going, and I'd actually been I used to go to work with her, and I'd been friends with one of her friends. It's a small world, isn't it? So I think she was. She would have been part of the satanic ritual abuse, just from what she did, and it was out of her character as well. So
the peninsula is bad, isn't it?
it's shocker.
So many stories from it.
Mornington, terrible. Like just talking. Got my granddaughter goes to school there. And I was where the school she was. I was telling one of the local there, and she said that the school she was at a few years ago now that the principal covered up, an incident in the the toilets happened to the child there. It was all covered over and hushed over. And that's recently. It's not the time of the the one there, the childcare centre. So,
and Mornington's another TON town, the cult of the Ton.
Yeah,
they do those towns with a TON on the end.
Well, I grew up in Frankston, and in Frankston North, which is the Pines, which is like Broadmeadows, like a Broadmeadows housing commission area, and so that was always that was a tough upbringing because there's an energy of place there. You can feel the darkness; it just goes through the neighbourhoods and. In my neighbourhood alone, there was, people across, one set their house on fire, there was shooting, and, there was always some kind of, there was gangs and, the skinheads and the sharpies and the surfies, but there was always a problem. But there was good families too, but, there was always the real problematic families. And more recently, there's a lot of people there that are just, you'd label as schizophrenic. Like there's people screaming in the streets from the voices annoying them. It's gone, up a whole notch. Yeah.
Wow. It's funny that you bring that up because I worked in mental health for a number of years, and they were the areas that I was allocated to. It was like Frankston, Mornington Peninsula, down Cranbourne Way. I spent many years working in different facilities down the way. So
yeah. Yeah, look, and it's true. You can't. It's like when you see, a derelict house or someone like a hoarder. That person's got a dark influence of some sort. There's a negative influence there in their life, and that whole area is like that. And it doesn't matter if you beautify the house or not. You might have good families in between, but it's still, you can't change it. It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, my mind goes in multiple directions, but I think two things that I want to bring up is the varying degrees of different like entities. Like not all of it is like, you've got your component that is very deeply entrenched in, bloodline, satanic ritual, that type of thing. But there are, like wandering spirits that just happen to see a light, trying to find a way home, don't realize that they've crossed over, and are influencing people in the way that it shows up to me is like the way that they will influence people is their behavior is almost transferred onto another person. So they'll start picking up behaviors or traits, even physical illnesses and sicknesses of what that person had before they passed on. People can have like random physical things that, I've experienced it many times in my life where I wake up, I'm like, what is this? And you do energy clearing and it goes away because there's an energy that's attached to it and there's a story that goes behind it based on another entity. But sometimes they are not so nefarious and a lot harmless, but they're just trickster energies or like creating havoc,
or unconsciously creating harm.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a great book I read years ago called The Boy Who Saw True, and it's a diary of a young boy in Victorian England who could see auras, and because he had he was quite a wealthy family, and he wrote the diary about what he could see, the lights around people and things like that. And it got published after his death, and probably in the 50s. But one thing he did see was that there was like, I think he had like a friend of the family or an aunt, and she was very masculine. And this is back in Victorian era, and she walked in a masculine way and spoke in a masculine way and was very gruff and not ladylike as you'd expect. But he could see an old man rightly attached right into her aura constantly. And it was like his influence was on her 24/7 and enough to change her mannerisms and her choices in life. Yeah.
Can we segue into
I knew where you were going, Reginald.
No, well, I think this is extremely important. It's a divisive kind of issue. But and like I'll actually segue this by saying I got a TikTok account about a month ago, right? I thought someone kept saying, "Oh, put your stuff on TikTok. You get more views, right? Because it's less of a restrictive algorithm." Which has been the case. But anyway, so I'm going on there, and they've got there's some good videos on there. But there's something in the flick rate, like that TikTok is its own entity, and it's bad. And anyway, so they've shown, and like I'm on there and just flicking, and every like 30, 40 flicks, you'll find a girl that's like promoting her OnlyFans, right? So like kids obviously seeing this. Like I haven't gone on to some adult website. This is just like flicking through and it comes up. And anyway, so after the lockdown, I've seen these graphs of the amount of transgender kids that have now transitioned since that 2020 lockdown period, and they introduced TikTok right at the same time into the West. And everyone's going, "Oh, it's all introduction. It's been done through school and condition." And like I think that's part of it, but what do you think's happening? This is what I'm trying to say. What do you think's happening with this, with the transgender, and are these people, do they have entity attachments?
Look, before transgender became a thing, I remember reading. It was actually a psychologist in England. He's quite renowned. He was noticing that the people that were coming in who are cross-dressing, called cross-dressing, and identifying it. He was also psychic, and he was seeing that they were actually possessed by a spirit, or obsessed or influenced by a spirit of the opposite sex. And he was also quite spiritual, and I can't remember the whole details, but he did work out a way to remove them through hypnosis or something like that. And anytime he was able to remove one of these entities, could just have been a lost soul, like Auntie Maud is attached to the nephew, and all of a sudden he thinks he's a woman, but the person would revert back to their normal feelings of their gender that they had before. So if it was something that came later, in life,
I think that's probably more of that's probably was a very rare kind of thing that was happening, where those energies are crossing it. Whereas what we're seeing now is not the same thing.
No, there's a whole agenda now. I think it depends what I've been trying to figure it out too, because the Luciferian agenda is the Baphomet, which is the male and the female combined, and they believe that's the most sacred form of being. So. And we know that the Illuminati families, we can see that a lot of people have been transgendered quite young and presented to us as the opposite sex. So they want to normalise that, and it also breaks up families, doesn't it? You can't have a cohesive society if you don't know whether you're Arthur or Martha, and it brings all the mental health problems with it, doesn't it? That's the other thing, because they did a study in Scandinavia, I think, over 20 years, and they found out that I think there was a 19 or 20% suicide rate over people that had gone through the full, become transgendered, and there was actually a really high incarceration rate as well. And so, like, there was, if you think about suicide rates, that's a massive, 1 in 5 people are transgender are going to take their own life.
Huge.
Yeah. It's so it hasn't had a positive effect for those people. They might have gone through the whole thing, but it's still, they're still not any better off at the end of it. You don't hear about a happy transgendered person very often.
That's I don't like the divide it's creating too, because there's a lot of these people, and they need to be helped too. But this is why I think the new one is a technology, because that's what I said. Like, it's come through TikTok, and it's really the transhumanist thing. They've put them on this tech that's interacting with the brain, and what does that AI tech want the most? It wants a homogenous
Yeah.
human 2.0. So it's like, of course, that's what the transgender.
Yeah, I agree. Like a neutralizing of
Yeah,
us. We're neutered.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's tech now because that's why the kids, as I said with my daughter, that's never out of her hand. She'll be on TikTok too. I mean, we weren't exposed to that. You might have been a little bit more, but it's everywhere now, and you can't, and I'm not against people transgendering if that's what they want to do at all. Live and let live. But if they're under the influence, then that's not fair. That's not what it should be.
Oh, so many things come to mind. I think it is something that has evolved, and what Louise was saying is something that I've back 100% is that I remember reading so many case studies when I was studying, and also sessions I've done over the years of like looking at the different ways of why people can have feelings towards being or transgender. I don't know how to summarize it, but it's this oh, my internet's gone unstable now. Am I still okay? Yeah.
Okay.
Entity attachment for sure. I also remember reading this case study of someone who'd had multiple lives, like 6 or 7 lives as one gender, and then came back as another. And so there was this feeling of being displaced because there was a predominant energy of something that had been accumulated and then it had swapped around.
But a lot of homosexuality, can be there as well,
Yeah.
But I think I said, I had that entity. I was a male masculine entity, that reptilian. So I felt very masculine, which was just against the odds to how I was. Does that make sense? So, so it's, there's so many things in play, but I do believe Dale's right that it's AI now. It really is.
That's what I was going to say. It's evolved as us as the human race, as we're evolving, the ways in which things can manipulate are evolving. And when you were talking about the TikTok and the tech and the AI, you know what I saw, Dale? It was like, when we talk about like entities as a smaller aspect of something that can influence, but like the bigger source of it being like this master being that's then infiltrating into technology, into TikTok app, whatever apps, and it's still an entity that's siphoning or suggesting or manipulating, but it's just this bigger machine that's kind of got, if you look at it like the head, and then it's got all these energetic tethers, almost like an octopus, but all these tethers.
Octopus. I saw an octopus.
Did you?
Like that. So that attach, say, like someone, like you've seen the crazy, like the real extreme of the trans activists, right? Like the behavior, like you just watch the behavior, and they're all like barking, and it's like insane. And it's very collective too in the way that they appear and dress and speak and everything like that. But that person that's been taken over on the multidimensional level, that's a light being on this level, and the hooks go all the way multidimensional. It's a huge feat. So there's a massive unseen war going on.
There is, and it's probably the same with some of the transgender people, as with a lot of people with the mental illness that you see in the psych wards. A lot of them are just massive light beings and empaths, and people that could have made a big change for this world, but they've been co-opted really, in the worst possible way. So
that was the other component that I really wanted to talk about. So thank you, Louise. You just segue right in. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because this is what's been sort of burning around in my mind in the last 24 hours, is that all the people who suffer from, and I always say mental health, because I don't believe in mental health. I do not for a second believe in mental health the way it's portrayed in our society. I truly believe that it's people who are impacted energetically, or what we're speaking about today,
energetic imbalance.
Yeah. And I think that's why I kind of got thrown into working in that field, because I was there to see it, to understand it, to realize that if I really wanted to make a difference, I couldn't do it in the system in the way that I truly wanted to. But everyone that I've ever worked with are the most beautiful, sensitive, powerful beings that have just had chaos in their life and been, trodden down. And it's the light that is being harvested from them because they are powerful creator beings. And I think the more sensitive you are, the more power that you have, the more you could be, or let's say susceptible to, I think there's a whole pattern at play there. And I remember I spoke to Marie Batchelor a couple of years ago, and she had great perspective on it. And she was just basically saying, and I can't remember exactly, but to paraphrase, like the whole mental health industry is basically targeting light workers,
Yeah, I agree.
And, I had a friend a couple of years ago, not that long ago, went in, got put into one of these facilities. And on the intake form, luckily she was aware enough, but on the intake form, they were asking questions like, do you see synchronized numbers on license plates? Yeah. Do you hear messages and songs and believe that that's communicating a message to you? So basically 101 of awakening, right? And connecting with that higher aspect is on the intake forms that they're interviewing when people go into these facilities. And if you answer yes to all those, then you get committed because, and I just,
when I was nursing, they used to call that magical thinking. and because people would think, because they're tuning into what we really can do, and then but they might, and then they're saying that they can make a change, and maybe they can, maybe they can't, but sometimes they can. Like the manic man that said he was going to win Tats Lotto, and then he kept on. It wasn't Tats Lotto, it was a scratchy, but he said he was going to win 40,000 on a scratchy, and he kept saying it. It was manic, and he did. But they thought he had magical thinking. It was delusional. He actually did, because he picked up, he either created it, manifested it, or knew it was going to happen.
Tapped into it,
that's you're coming from in that medical system. It's probably like the most ignorant system on the planet. It's such a closed, dogmatic structure that, and then you're dealing with people that are in the other position. It's crazy.
There's the psychiatrists, it's just glorified drug pushes, because that's all they're really doing. They're writing a script, and they're not the ones I've known. Most of them have been quite arrogant, as well. So they really think that that's their way and they know it all. So there was one. It was a trainee psychiatrist that wasn't like that, and he ended up killing himself. So amazingly, and he had no sign that he was going to do that. So I always remember him. He was such a good, would have been a great doctor in psychiatry, but he didn't make it. So that's what happens, you see. It's only the ones that get to the higher positions are always the ones that are more into the system and more into the other agendas. Yeah.
The arrogance of ignorance, they call
it. Yeah, that's true. And I'm not saying they're bad people, but they're caught up in their own, story.
Well, did you want to go through some of those books that you were showing us at the start?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Particularly because that kind of segues into, because the whole Western psychiatry is a pretty new thing, right? And the way of much of the world looks at mental illness is much different even today.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've probably, because I've been trying to figure this out, and of course no one has all the answers, and I don't either at all, but the shamanic sort of beliefs of sort of South America and Siberia tend to be the ones I sort of lean towards, and they believe the main two causes of mental illness are A, possession, spirit possession, and this is the old sort of times, it's before the AI sort of stuff, and B, soul loss, through trauma. How we fracture parts parts of our souls off and we lose parts, and so that they tend to be the things and that they look at. So, and I think, you know, every time, and when a light worker's traumatized or an empath's traumatized, it's always really impactful, and, you know, it takes away from their ability to function in the world the way they should, you know, to give the most of themselves. So that, you know, that's something. So I'll show you the first book that I recommend is, just tell me if you can see that all right. It's called Entering the Circle.
Who's that by?
It's by Olga Karatidi. It's Kharitidi, and she was a psychiatrist in a great big mental institution in Siberia. And so she was looking after the worst of the worst in the worst conditions. And she was doing a good job, but then she ended up through synchronicities meeting a Siberian shaman. A man from the shaman's village came in because he was becoming psychotic, basically, and she started speaking to him and was interested in what he had to say, and she ended up meeting a shaman and becoming aware of the influences of the entities on her patients, and she realised that you know, like that young man that's psychotic is only going to end up with the negative symptoms of the psychosis and be non-productive, you know, just be someone who can't work and can't you know, have a normal life unless the entities were removed. So that's a really good book. So I recommend that to anyone, because, you know, it gives you some ideas of, you know, of you know, from both perspectives. So I haven't read this one in a while, but it's The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore, and it says a psychologist treats spirit possession. So that's another beauty. And she said it's moved by the suffering of her patients who came to her with seemingly incurable psychological and psychosomatic problems. The noted psychologist began to explore beyond the boundaries of traditional psychiatry and made the startling discovery that a significant number of patients were suffering from a spirit possession, a condition that no amount of orthodox treatment could cure. So I would highly recommend that one. That is a beauty. I haven't read this one, but I reckon that would be good. So
this is one I'm interested in.
Yeah,
Samuel Sagan.
I'll just send it to you. Give me an address. I'll give it to you, because I won't read it. So
even the picture's really cool. Sorry, read that.
Yeah. The back says, written by medical doctor Samuel Sagan, the book deals with possession and exorcism from a fresh, original perspective. The style is direct and matter of fact, although many of the recorded observations and case histories could have come from fiction thrillers. And he deals with subjects rationally with a sense of humour. A fascinating expose that includes many tips on how to deal with people reporting entity phenomenon. So I'll send that up to you, Dale, so you can have that one. That's fine.
What's it called again?
Entities, Parasites of the Body of Energy.
Wow.
I know. Yeah. So yeah.
Even the picture got me too. It's like,
yeah.
like
I think you need
to EID mind shattering. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll send it up. You can have a read. And this talks about another cause of possession, obsession is when people use sorcery and magic. Of course, we don't want to talk about that in the West, but it's prevalent in many cultures, and there can be an actual psychic attack from another person using entities and manipulating spirits or energies to cause illness and harm or to control people. So this is about a shaman called, his name's James Enready. He's an American shaman, and it says he woke up in the underworld entrance of the north, because or north south, nearly dead from an evil witch's attack. And this is where the gripping true account of his experience of the witches of Veracruz begins. He's an apprentice of a powerful healer, and he learns the mystical arts of the bruja, a form of Aztec witchcraft. And through his training, he learns about the darkness and the light and what people do. So you hear about people that can do transform into animals and things like that, that type of thing. But it also talks a lot about attack, and about people who go mad from being targeted by people that can use the dark arts. And the biggest thing with that is we don't want to know about it. We don't want to believe it in the West, but if you know about it, you can protect yourself. So that's what it's called. That one's very hard to get. It was about $80, and there's not a lot around. It's out of print, but if you can get any of his, that would be good. There you go. And last but not least, I had to bring my old psychiatric book on, and because we were going to talk about, this is what I was taught about transgenderism back in the early 90s. It was called, can you see that? A gender identity disorder. And that's what I was taught and how it would be treated. So it was in the DMR as a gender. So what we're looking as normal now and encouraging was looked as a disorder back when I first started psychiatry. So which, so was homosexuality. I mean, back in the 50s and that, just, to be fair, and a lot of other things. But it just shows you, the changes in perception. So, but that's a great little book too. Always good read.
Isn't it? Yeah, if anyone wants to, if anyone wants to.
Phenomenal resource data bank. Thank you,
Louise. Yeah, it's okay. But the reason I'm showing this is because, look, we aren't the victims of any of this type of thing. It might affect our lives and our friends and our family, but once we know something else is at play, there is some degree of things that we can do to help ourselves and others. And not everyone can be helped. Maybe that person with schizophrenia is, pick that as a lesson, and it's teaching them their soul something and those around them, as well. So, there's all reasons why things happen, and not everything's here to be cured or changed, but we certainly can protect ourselves as light workers from, attacks if we're aware. And and I think the awareness is the biggest thing.
And I truly, what comes to mind to me is, like, if we go down that path where we are impacted by these things, I think it only helps to facilitate a strengthening and maturity and, like, reclaiming our sovereignty. Like, if you're looking at the ultimate purpose of having some of these things done, and I can speak from personal experience, because I joke about how, when I opened myself up to healing and energy and all that, when I was very young, I spent a decade, going through what I call, like, a very extreme initiation or Olympics of working with, psychic attack and entities and things like that. Like, the stories I could personally tell of things that I've experienced myself. But what did that do? That set me up to be to do the work that I do these days. It had a purpose. I mean, I look back, some of those experiences were horrific, but my goodness, did I learn a lot. Like,
and it gave you the empathy and the knowledge and the tools to help other people, and that's the biggest gift of it all, isn't it, really? And that's why you are who you are and you do what you do. It's because you've been through those trials. And your soul's been a little bit honed while you're here.
But I think that's all of our path to some degree. I mean, it's all going to look, variations differently, but I think that what I call, like, the 4D pathway, as we're going through this process of, becoming, ascension, whatever you want to call it, we go through this testing passageway, this initiation, to integrate the energy essence of who we truly are into physicality. And, that's what we're doing as a planet. But we have to go through those phases of integrating the shadow and, learning who our seen and unseen opponents are, so that we can, so
and have fun doing it too. Like, that's the thing too. You got to just detach and have a bit of sense of humor, and enjoy the play, because it's hard to do it while you're right in it, but it's always good to have a good look and a good laugh, in hindsight, isn't it?
and I always say to people not to fear this topic, because there's so much fear and stigma around it. But when you working with clearing entity attachments and people get all paranoid and fearful, like, that's the energy that's being harvested from you. So it's to really, as much as you can, stay out of fear, and that is the best way to kind of neutralize that, and I know that I've gone from being in extreme terror to having experiences to, like, waking up in the middle of the night going, oh God, I'm too tired to deal with this, just You know,
Yeah.
so there is a progression.
There is a time when you just tell them to F off. You know, just go, I can't be bothered, just F off. You know? And then they just stop. Like I find, or they just find more creative ways to be annoying at times, you know, and then you just laugh at that as well, you know. So there, you know, I think I was listening to someone, you know, you get to a point where you've raised your vibration enough that you're not going to be attacked anyway, you know,
Yeah.
or limited anyway, at least limited. We live in a realm that's not that easy not to be, but limited. So
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And thank you. That's sort of what I was getting at, is there is that threshold of that period where we're learning to navigate through having those experiences till we come out the other side of it, where it's kind of beyond us. It doesn't impact us because we've learned everything that we've.
I think they're jumping around, right? Because they're all. I feel like that, like the real lower ones, they're all scattered, and that's just because of the natural energy shift that's happening. Like there will be a point that those that are merging onto that frequency are energetically invisible, and it's I think they're kind of frantic because they're picking up on that too, and they probably don't understand what that is. Right? They wouldn't at their level of consciousness.
Yeah, I agree. Have you noticed too? I was saying to Alisha last when we spoke last, that a lot of my friends are just had a lot of drop off of friends, you know, and like either people passing or just dropping out of my world for no good reason. And I just feel like that's energetic as well. It's like we're being shifted around. Like I can't. The more you do this work, the more you can't attach to things that, you know, were, you know, not at your frequency anymore. You know, you're in a different, not you're better, but you're at a different vibration, you know, from them. So I've noticed that's been happening very recently. It's just like, well, don't hang on to anyone because there's no guarantee that they're going to be there tomorrow as well. You know, it's becoming more, you know, be more about being happy in yourself and finding happiness from within than from needing, you know, even friendships. I mean, you know, it doesn't and it obviously opens the path for other ones for high vibration. But yeah, there's definitely a vibrational change going, because I've never seen as many people leaving early off the planet, and not just because of the reasons we know either. Yeah, so
I think that I've noticed that's been the hardest thing for a lot of people, especially people that have kind of changed their perceptions in the last few years. That that's what they struggle with, is just like friends aren't friends anymore, and like they're going, but it's just a rebalancing, and that's includes people as well.
And that's, I've gone through many phases of that. The first one was like the most painful, and then you kind of
get used to it.
You understand the process of it, and you don't take it as personally. And one thing that was always taught to me, it's never personal, it's vibrational. And it doesn't mean lower or higher. It just means people literally go into their own realities that's not like it doesn't connect with yours. And I think my observation is, at the end of last year, there was this big timeline shift, and it feels to me like everyone kind of went into the pocket of their own reality. You know, it's just been this very weird time like no other. And I just want to come back to what you said, Dale. I think I'm glad that we're talking about this, because the energies are the most intense I've ever witnessed in terms of trying to hold on for dear life because of this change and shift that we're going through. So when it comes to what I said in the beginning, people are being very challenged on a mental health level, but there's all these energetic components and influences that are being stirred up so much right now, and that's, I feel, the phase that we're moving through.
It's like we've been given the harshest sort of lessons at the moment, and nowhere to really anchor, but as a collective we've been taught not to be resilient. Don't be resilient, be a victim. Like all the things that's been going on in the press lately. Or even, do you remember when people were encouraged to go to safe rooms in this universities when Trump got into power, that type of thing? It's like, did you ever hear about that? Yeah. So they're teaching this whole lot of stuff to young people not to be resilient, just to fall into despair and go and be comforted and get your teddy bear and rock in the corner. And now we're being hit with these energies that just don't. You have to have resilience. You have to have some strength and strength of mind and strength of heart and strength of character to get through them. So it's quite interesting. I found that when the population is its least resilient, it's given the highest trials.
Sorry, I'm going to go totally off topic here because I've never actually had the opportunity to ask Dale this, but I'll throw it to both of you. I picked up intuitively that because the magnetic poles are shifting, the ley lines, the energetics, that is why we're having so much like lower level energies or entities being dispersed onto the planet trying to latch onto anyone. Because if you think about all the different sacred sites and the energy that they hold, the rituals that have been done on those, and now if you think about the energetics of those shifting, it almost opens up these portals of energy everywhere that's being displaced. And what reminds me of that as an analogy is I know that from what I understand during the times of Lemuria and when they were going through their shift and transition, there were all these entities that got released, like the dimensional layers got very thin or split, and all these lower level entities sort of got cast out into a realm they didn't understand, and they were just inhabiting people and making people really sick towards the end of the shift, but it all got cleaned up. And I don't know if that's my own soul memory like playing out, or is are we at the end of this era and something similar, or there's an echo that's occurring? But I don't know, I just thought I'd put it out to you guys if you have.
So it's reality split because it's the veil's thinner, but that's to make the choice you have to be able to see both, right? So it's like both are going to be presented or going to be observed. That's how I see it. But the other one too is like, I think like, with everyone moving to, lots of people are moving to different places, and not just relocation of friends, but of people. And that's like, I think that's people are going more into their natural location astrology when we're not knowing it, right? And you're like built better on certain lines at certain times, and that means you're not hooked into one area for all your life, maybe. So that can be
good observation. A lot of my friends are moving up to far north Queensland, at the moment. So it's just like, oh, where are you going? They're around Harvey Bay, but inland from Harvey Bay area. A lot of two just recently said out of from the peninsula or from Victoria, Gippsland, just out of the blue. So
shifting and shuffling. Interesting times. Dale, did you have questions? You said that you might have had a couple of, I don't know, from your Telegram or something.
Oh yeah. Hang on, let me just check it out. I'm gonna have to go soon. I'm like cooking in here.
I'm so jealous. Yeah, well,
yes, I do. Hang on. If you get a chance, could you please ask Alisha about ECT? Oh, that was for you, Alisha. What's ECT?
Electroconvulsive therapy. It's
okay, right.
Yeah.
Is that like brain shock therapy? Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually used to do ECT as a nurse. So, what happens is normally if someone's in a really deep depression or it's either psychotic depression or just a major depressive episode, and the medication wasn't working, they would give them a mild anesthetic so they're knocked out for a few minutes, and then they'd run electric current to the brain. So it's a shock, electroconvulsive therapy. So they get a shock to the brain. When you observe it, it's nothing. We'd be looking to see someone's toe twitch. That was to know that it had happened. So, and then the person will come out, be groggy for a few hours, and over a few courses of ECT, I can't remember how many, you'd hope to see, maybe say 6, you'd hope to see some improvement in the person. And there's a couple of things. It actually did work. Like, it was one of the few things I actually saw work. I don't know if it worked long term because you're hard to follow up patients, but what I think it was doing was the electric shock was actually dislodging the entity. So because that's what I felt what was happening.
So
because
sorry,
Yeah.
If it was a technological being, would that have the same influence too? If it's electricity based, or
Yeah.
like, what do you think?
It could be. And look, I don't know if it kept them away in the long term, but I certainly saw great results. I mean, not everyone, like, but out of everything, that was the only treatment that I saw have any positive results, to be quite honest, other than some, if people had a mild depression, antidepressants, of course, would work, or if they had an anxiety, and the anxiety drugs would work. But for something major, that was the only thing I saw that was. But in the old days, they do it to people that weren't under anaesthetic, and they fry them. And even today, when it happens, people do get short-term memory loss. So it works, but there's not everyone either, but there is short-term memory loss is a symptom afterwards, and so it does muck around with your brain. So
Is that kind of like dissociation, maybe, because the entity had taken over, that they've got short-term memory?
I'm not too sure. Could physically be that the brain, was physically damaged, or the neuron pathways were interfered with. So I'm not sure, Dale. But I did in my nursing see one person that had a lobotomy, and she'd had it in the 30s. I don't remember a lot about her because she was elderly when I saw her in Larundel in the 90s. But she was just there was no animation. She was just a zombie. She was barely alive. She could walk. She couldn't talk. She could just barely eat and barely exist. Get to the toilet and back, and that was her life. She'd been, I think, from memory, I think she was a teenager when she'd had the lobotomy. They gave it to people that had psychosis, where they were quite violent and aggressive, supposedly. I don't know if that's really the case, but, when there's just uncontrollable behaviours, which would make sense if she was a teenager and she had, an entity. So,
How horrible.
Yeah, it was. So, yeah. The other thing that was awful was, with the ECT, you're looking for the that convulsion, so we'd see the little toe twitch, a little bit, and then you knew that it had worked. And I remember we put a lady who had really bad depression. She'd been in Auschwitz, and she was she'd been a seamstress lady, and she'd been tortured by the Nazis. They like shot at her, this torture, like she survived, obviously. And she was quite psychotic, she'd had these psychotic depressions, and she'd had the ECT, but they had her on anticonvulsive medication, and they kept putting her through, and it wasn't working, they thought, but they actually didn't realise they'd put her on anticonvulsants. So, so she wasn't seeing the twitch because, yeah, so, so joy to the system of the time. So this poor lady, she's tortured by the Nazis and tortured by us, Larundel. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
the stories. If those walls could talk, and what you can, what you're sharing is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, I know you have to go, Dale. So I thought.
You just can keep going. I'm just busting to go to the toilet, and I'm sweating. But yeah, go if you want to.
Well, we can probably wrap it up at this point, because we've been going for probably close to an hour and a half anyway. But I feel like we've only scratched the surface. I think that we should probably, if you guys are open to it, maybe look at doing this again and going a little bit deeper and covering more aspects, because I feel like I've only sort of gone over it like a few things.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you both so much for being here, to having this conversation, to sharing your knowledge and wisdom and experience. Before we wrap it up, is there any final thoughts or words or encouragement, or what would you say to people that are listening that may need support going through these times?
Want me to?
I'll go. You can finish off.
Go.
I'll just say, be very wary. Like what I was saying with TikTok, just be very wary of that that energetic influence of too much tech. I think that a lot of it's being driven through that. And again, what I said before with the Crimson Mist stuff, that you're actually you vibrate on a frequency above a lot of that stuff. If they can get you into a fear or a negative response, then it has a much greater impact on you. So that's something that you can take. You've got control over.
Yeah.
I agree. And nature. Get out into nature. You know, just don't take your phone with you. Just go and, you know, go for walks, bike rides, whatever. Not that I go on bike rides, but just get out and, you know, get the positive ions or negative ions. Well, negative, isn't it? The negative ions. And nature doesn't lie. Nature doesn't harm. Just go out and enjoy, you know. That's the thing. And, you know, we are all loving beings. We're all creative beings. It is, I know it sounds a bit depressing, but we all do have some way of learning. Educate yourself, you know, read those type of books, then let it go, you know, and then do things you love, be creative, be passionate, you know, love the people around you, and things will naturally, you know, work out for you in your life. You know, you still have your trials, still have your tribulations, you'll have your dark times, but it'll be a lot easier for it to get through. So, you know, it's really important that it's the basic stuff. It's always the simplest things. Be heart-centered, go out to nature and do the things you love and be with people you love.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Louise. Thank you so much, Dale. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And yeah, just to reiterate, keep it simple and stay in your heart space. Until next time. Thank you, everyone. We'll connect soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.